Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to have you back. It is just after 1 p.m. on day 3, 1 p.m. Eastern on day 3 of our First Nations Housing Conference and our theme, Building Healthy Homes. So this session is a technical session and it is on subdivision development. And we have Drew Hill with us today to do the presentation. He is from Ontario First Nations Technical Services Corporation and works as a project engineer. As many may know, in planning for housing, often, a lot of other work goes in beforehand, and subdivisions and planning are a part of that. And just a bit more about Drew. Drew Hill is a professional engineer born and raised on the Six Nations of the Grand River. He is from the Turtle Clan of the Mohawk Nation, with strong roots in the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Mr. Hill has been working on a variety of engineering projects over the past 25 years, including mining, environment, remediation, geotechnical, renewable energy, home energy, civil works, and infrastructure projects. Currently, Drew is working for Ontario First Nations Technical Services on a wide variety of engineering projects, assisting First Nations all across Ontario. He believes in working with First Nations communities to strengthen knowledge and create economic opportunity and self-reliance. Drew has 3 adult children and has been with his wife Carla for 20 years. So let's give our time to Drew and welcome him today. And let's have a great session together.
Thanks, Clarence. And thank you for the committee for asking me to do my speech today. Firstly, I would like to apologize to my wife for the 20 years that we spent together. Just teasing here, but so I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen here. Make sure I got the right one. Yeah, I'm from the working from the Ontario First Nation Tech Services Corporation, and out of Brantford, Ontario. Just gotta figure out how to advance. Sorry, I'm not just sure how to advance right now. Oh, there we go. And today I'm going to be doing a discussion on subdivision development within First Nations territories. Okay, as Clarence alluded to, my name is Drew Hill. I have a biology degree from University of Western Ontario, as well as a Bachelor of Science degree in mining from the University of Toronto. I was born and raised on the Six Nations of the Reserve. I am a Genyingahage of the Turtle Clan. My given name is Hajakto, and I do that by way of introduction because my clan and my Ongwahoe name comes from my mother, or matrilineal. And in that way, it provides a place for myself within my clan and also my nation. And it also points to where my voice might be heard within the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. So why is this important here? Why would I even mention this? One of the things is because our future is often tied to our past. A past that has not always been very smooth. And knowing that past, warts and all, can help planning. When we talk about subdivision planning, we're really talking about the end of a planning process, if you will. So one of my observations here is our traditional understanding of our homes often involves more than 4 walls and a bed, but extends to the lands our people and ancestors have walked from time immemorial. This represents an Indigenous sense of home. It provides food, medicines, and a sense of where we fit in. We need a safe place where our families can raise children, attend to our elders, and also provide for them. How do we build that healthy space for people and cultures to grow in today's modern age communities. You can look to tools such as land use planning, traditional land use studies. Where do we hunt? Where do we heal? Where do we raise our children and help our children's children, and so on? And having a strategic plan on where, when, and how we are going to grow removes uncertainty and questions from within about why a subdivision is going in and where it is going. From that point on, once the planning is done, the rest is engineering and design. So as I said, the purpose here is to provide an overview of planning for the development of subdivision on territory. Legislatively, the predominant Indigenous services level of service standards would prevail in terms of you know, what you can do, or if you want to provide water or whatnot to your houses. If you're in a municipal type service agreement where you're adjacent to a municipality or a city, then you would probably be looking at making sure that your systems or your subdivisions are in compliance with their types of their needs, if you will. And because we're building roads, we're likely going to be connected to the Ontario roads highway system, you're probably going to have to look to comply with the MTO standards and regulations. If you're remote, obviously that might not necessarily be a concern for you there. Bylaws and zoning, most First Nations that I've had dealings with so far have not had to deal with that. But if you are from that First Nation with bylaws and zoning as relation to what you can build and where you can build, then you obviously have to work with your community leadership to make sure that you're in compliance there. One of the biggest things that I've in terms of a planning document has been the comprehensive community capital plan. And again, that forms the basis for how your community is going to grow in a long-term situation where you're looking at infrastructure, buildings, and also obviously residential. Currently, I have not worked on an Indigenous Services Canada funded subdivision that did not have a comprehensive community plan involved. Land use planning, again, outlines where where on the territory your community allocates activities and resource use, which also would include housing. The traditional land use, again, trying to tie in where your people, maybe how they traditionally use the land, and making sure that your residents or your houses or your subdivision are dovetailed or with that type of understanding. Now, with all of that having been said, when we actually get down to developing a subdivision, one of the first things that we want to look at is the feasibility study. Basically, that's going to tell us, you know, how many houses are we going to build? What kind of, do we have water? Do we have wastewater? All of those types of things. So I'll get into that a bit later. But right now, any good project is going to need a strong project team, and the First Nation is obviously going to be the owner of their subdivision. They want to make sure that the project, the subdivision, is going to meet their needs in the long term, and they need to have a strong position as a team leader there. Generally speaking, the public works manager, the housing manager might be in a position of take the lead on that. But there's also, I would also recommend that a band council members or chief even be involved and engaged in that project team. We usually get involved with FNHC. I usually get involved fairly early on, in terms of, you know, can we do this? Where can we do this? What do we need? When I first started, I did start a project, and it wasn't necessarily a subdivision, but it was something that wasn't necessarily planning, that we didn't have the planning in place. So they wanted to change their childcare facility from the existing one, as it was problematic. So we hired an RFP, we went through an RFP process. We got a engineering design to do a options analysis and feasibility study for us. They got on site, and there was almost immediate conflict between the administrative staff and the leadership in terms of where they were contemplating putting this. It turns out that the community hadn't done any of the upfront planning of where something of this nature might actually go, that community comprehensive planning study. And so in the end, the recommendation was actually to do that prior to this particular project. So yeah, so we usually get involved fairly early on, whether it's ISC funding, Indigenous Services Canada. Typically I've been involved in those types of ones. I have not been engaged with one that is CMHC driven, so I'm not entirely familiar with their process. So we would provide the technical guidance. We would look to hire your feasibility person, our engineering firm, and then taking that information, we would go to Indigenous Services and submit for funding for that. So once we get into the actual project, you might also have a design consultant. Well, you're going to need a design consultant once we get our funding in place. So those are team members that might be engaged in your project. And again, this is just a reiteration of where the type of team members you might have. You might actually consider hiring a professional project manager. I haven't encountered that situation as of yet. Typically, you know, we're looking at community or subdivision housing that's fairly close to the First Nation, and they want to make sure it meets their needs. So if you hire an outside professional project manager, they really have to be enmeshed, if you will, with your understanding of what the community wants. So typically, this is an in-house activity. I've seen it done by van managers, public works managers, as well as housing managers. So, you know, we often, in that situation, I'll come in and help with the project management of those types of projects. So design engineer, once we bring them on board, we basically gave them a huge plethora of information in terms of past reports, water, wastewater projects, feasibility studies, land use. So they're going to get all this information, and we try to have that in a digital format. And again, I have not worked on a project that did not have a comprehensive community plan for where the subdivision was going to go. So other studies that the design engineer is probably going to need would include topographical surveys, geotechnical studies. Basically, what's the ground, what's the overburden look like? Where's the rock, where's the bedrock and whatnot? Environmental, are there environmental concerns or environmental vectors or environmental elements that might need to be protected, and how are we going to do that? Archaeological investigations. I haven't encountered one of these yet, but I think a lot of that relates to the planning that goes ahead, where the communities then communities have a general understanding of where their places of significance as it relates to archaeology might be. These are usually dealt with as provisional items where we set aside money to complete these types of studies. So the objective for the design engineer is to get to what are called tender documents. And these tender documents are fairly highly detailed. And we use those to solicit bids from firms to do the construct and conceptual and develop your subdivision. You know, so that's the end goal for their design engineer. And then obviously, once we have a contractor in place, who is going to do the construction, who's going to do the building of your subdivision, that's the end goal for issuing it, the tender documents. Very critical here. Obviously, communication throughout is very critical. But with the construction, you might have interruption of services, whether it's electrical, water, natural gas, or other, or even maybe an emergency situation. So these are this is where you want to make sure you have that communication. Generally, your project team leader should be that first person of communication, so that they can, if situations arise, they can notify the community. Contract administration is basically quality assurance, quality control, making sure that the site is constructed in according to your specs, according to your specifications. So you know, this might be, well, I've never seen like the First Nation have a person specialized in this, so that they might be able to contract out. Usually it is the design engineer will provide that. I was on a job, this is not a subdivision, but I was on a job with a engineering firm where we designed a tailings dam in South America, and we were the design team. So my job on that design was basically running models. But when we finished up our design, they sent me and a number of other guys down south to oversee and help to do the quality assurance for that construction. So it's kind of a continuation of the engineering designs, the design engineer, to make sure that what they've conceptualized and designed actually gets spec'd out in construction. So yeah, and of course, once the construction's all done, everybody wants to celebrate and run around and pop champagne and stuff like that. But we've got to make sure that what we do in terms of closing out the project, we want to make sure that the as-built documents get submitted and get submitted to you. And it's important, again, to archive them, make sure you know where they are, because you're going to have to want to dig up something at some point, and you don't want to be running across all different underground services. And again, you want to know, where we can develop for future. So yeah, so getting back to the comprehensive community planning component, basically, if you're going to start building houses, you need to be able to provide services to it. Of importance, obviously, is water. How are these new houses going to get their water? Point of entry systems where you have water treatment before it goes into a household from a well. Communal versus, again, the MTA, the municipal type agreement. And again, wastewater. Similarly, how are the new houses going to deal with wastewater, whether it's through septic, communal, or cisterns, and MTA, and keeping in mind that septic and cisterns will need to be emptied from time to time, depending on your population and how much stuff that they produce. Obviously, electricity is something that we all live with and need right now. Where is it going to come from? Underground, overhead? You got to engage with Hydro One or Hydro One remotes, depending on where you're going to be building. Natural gas, is it something that's available for you, or propane tanks, stuff like that. And nowadays, I think the socioeconomic condition of most peoples will be judged based on their access to the internet, fiber optics, and internet. So whether most households with school-age children, and right now, obviously, adults working from home, and even the internet commerce, those are opportunities that are presented with a strong internet connection. Road access for EMS, police, and fire department, fire flow. Make sure that you have enough water to deal with potential fires, household fires, and whatnot. And snow removal, often that kind of gets overlooked. Where are you going to put the snow? Where's it going to be pushed to during the snow season? And again, what type of housing are you looking at? Do you need single family, multi-generational, single persons, or those things? We often look to build these single family, 4-bedroom, 3-bedroom homes, but I'm finding a lot of communities, they don't have enough place for their single people. So those are concerns as well. And how do we, once we have all of that sort of understanding of where these things are going to go, this is where the feasibility study will be engaged in. So regardless, the comprehensive planning study, it basically outlines this is going to go here, your water's going to go here, we're going to have an arena here. This is grandiose planning. But when it comes to the actual how are we going to do it? We have to start with looking at like a feasibility study and determine whether or not your infrastructure can accommodate your increased demand, and what possible limitations might they be, and also what we would look to from that is a cost estimate. That cost estimate, like I said, is it's going to be a high level, possibly a Class D or Class C cost estimate, where Class D is plus or minus 15%, and Class C might be a 10%. Anyways, so depending on the cost, the estimated cost, we're going to be either submitting a minor capital application or a project approval request to Indigenous Services Canada. And again, once we, doing a feasibility study ensures that those costs can be defendable and are real, if you will. So as the First Nation owner, your responsibility is to make sure that the background documents are available. You have to be able to describe the existing conditions, subsurface conditions, geotechnical, archaeological, anything designated substances if applicable. And also, one of the engineers that I was in discussion about this presentation, he wanted me to point out that the legal survey is something that they often run into problems with, the legal boundaries of the lot lines, and making sure that the Canadian legal surveyors are utilized in doing their the survey of the actual subdivision. So yeah, and then First Nation, obviously health and safety. COVID has put both community and leadership at the forefront to protect themselves and potential contractors that might be on site. And First Nations also have to have their decision-making process in place. Typically, the ones I've been involved in have been a group decision. I might provide advice, technical advice in terms of what decision we might need to make. Payments, it's your job will increase if you can't, if you're not processing payments in a timely manner, because obviously people need to get paid for their services. And then funding agency reporting if necessary. It seems to be always necessary. Even if you report, if it's a self-funded program, you need to report how we spent the money and where. And usually, oftentimes, I get engaged in that those reporting requirements as well. Change orders are inevitable, regardless of how well you plan ahead of time. How good your specs are, you're going to encounter situations that will require change orders. Change orders always may also involve costs, those types of things. And so, this is where the First Nation has to have that strong leadership. And again, like you have to understand how your decision making occurs within your community. If you have what's the threshold for signing authorities and whatnot. So basically, have that understanding. When is a big CR going to be required? Those types of things. And again, those are things that kind of would vary from community to community. So your engineering design consultant, this is typically a CDC 31 type of service agreement. They would have to, it's basically the type of contract that you would enter into with them. And again, they would need to have a pretty strong understanding of your housing needs, your goals, what are your housing goals, your costs, timeframes, and schedules. And having reviewed all their necessary background field and implemented and designed their fieldwork study, and to make themselves knowledgeable of your needs, if you will, in sufficient detail to develop that understanding of what materials in terms of quality and quantity are going to be required to spec out your job, to develop your terms of reference, or develop your tender documents about. So your tender documents for construction, typically he's not gonna show up and say, this is what you need, this is, you're not gonna need blah 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 X and Y and Z, and you're not gonna shouldn't get railroaded by that. If you are, then you probably hired the wrong design engineer. So there's usually 4 iterations that you will go through before arriving at those detailed tender documents. The first one would be your design brief, also known as a 33% design, and then the 66% design, and the 99%, and then finally your final drawing and specs, which be incorporated and considered your tender documents for construction. You should expect to be able to review and comment on each of these different iterations. It's important, obviously, this is your project, this is your vision for how your families are gonna where they're gonna live. So you want to make sure that you have your say in terms of how the subdivision is going to be constructed and whatnot. So design brief might be typically, it's fairly high level, and really it's there to demonstrate your consultant's understanding of what that project's going to entail. This in particular is very important for you to get involved with that review and to provide input into it, because again, that's if your consultant's off base at that point, then you got to be able to bring them back in line in terms of where you want them, where you want their focus to be. 66% design generally includes, you start getting some preliminary drawings there, and then by the time you get to your 99%, your project is close to complete. You're really just dotting T's and crossing I's, if you will. I think I said that wrong. So final drawings and specs, again, will be your tender documents that you're going to use for soliciting construction contractors to bid on your project. Very detailed. It should provide you a material list of and quantities of what you're going to need. Are you going to need to blast any bedrock, those types of things, and your roads, what type of surface are you going to be at, sidewalks, all those types of things, and also your infrastructure and services that you're going to be needing as well. So this is the end goal, if you will. Now, in terms of contracting, the contractor's role basically, obviously, is to perform and conduct construction works. They determine methods and means of construction, the schedule coordination, construction safety, and again, to clarify any design-related issues. This is where you might potentially get into some change orders, if you will. You can look at entering into a Canadian Construction Document Committee approved contract, the CCDC, similarly to the one that was you entered into for the engineer. But so the most of the projects I've been engaged with are stipulated price contracts, where it's between the owner and the prime contractor, and the contractor has total control of work and seeks to direct and supervise the work to ensure conformity with the contract documents. You can also look at something like a design build stipulated price contract, but typically in that situation, the design engineer is also the builder. So you might get off track and you might not be able to bring them back on track if their design isn't quite matching up to what you're envisioning. So there's, in my opinion, you would lose a lot of control of that, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend that approach. But yeah, again, it might be appropriate for some type of contracts, and not necessarily this one, as far as I could see. And so throughout this project, you're going to get various cost estimates. Your feasibility cost is going to be fairly pie in the sky. Well, not pie in the sky. It's going to be a defendable cost estimate. So it might be a Class C or Class D with basically a 10 to 15% contingency. Your 33% design through to your 66, where you're actually getting increased, going to be a Class B. And then finally, when you're actually going out to contract, your design engineer should be able to provide you with a Class A cost estimate with a 5% contingency. And again, if you're getting a funding program with Indigenous Services or CMHC, you're going to want to submit, make sure that you got monies available for construction once you're through to the tender portion. I think everybody has been seeing these costs growing, almost doubling in the last year with the pandemic, and you know, we are having to go back to our feasibility contractors, consultants, engineers to revisit their cost estimates just from last year, and based on and with uncertainty for where our costs are right now. So it's important to get that understanding. Even just now, I had one subdivision. We came in, we started out figuring that we were gonna spend about 1.8 million, and the recent estimate we got was around 2.6. So these are interesting times, but again, make sure that you can have costs that are defendable, I guess, if you will. So but yeah, it's uncertain time if you're doing a cost estimate out there right now. So generally, as a conclusion, there's really no hard and fast way to go about building your subdivision. you know, each community is unique, and their journey to building a safe and healthy home is unique. But I think if you keep that goal in mind, that you're building safe, healthy homes for your people, you know, put it in a good place, as you say, as the Haudenosaunee would say, have a good mind about how you're going to build for your people, and make sure that's reflected in your planning. Make sure it's reflected in your discussions with your project manager, with someone like myself. So, you know, your design engineer, you know, we have to, you know, you are going to be the owner of this. Take ownership of it, and understand that it's for your people. And, you know, by the time some of your engineering consultant shows up, design the subdivision, a lot of that planning and forethought should be done. So you don't want to be surprised by, you know, somebody coming out left field saying we own this land, or you can't be building there, or whatnot. So make sure you understand in planning. And again, there's the projects I've been engaged with, there's usually individuals that are going to be your leaders. One lady, I think her motivation was to get her daughter and her kids out of her house. So she was very motivated to make sure that we build these family homes. So, but again, that's what every community is different. So I think that's it for now. If you have any questions, I'll be doing my best to answer them. This isn't my, I've been involved in a number of these, so I have a general overview of how we can help. But if you have any questions, if I can't answer them, I'll definitely take your information down, and we can, and I'll try to make sure I address them. Okay.
All right, thanks a lot, Drew. There is a question on the Q&A. The question is, would it be advisable to go to design or to work, you know, developing a subdivision without a CCP? I assume that means comprehensive community plan.
Like I said, I mean, you might have a master plan. You got to have something in place that says, you know, how many houses are you going to need? Can the infrastructure accommodate that? So, I mean, you might be able to get away with it, maybe just doing a feasibility study. But I think one of the funding requirements might actually be to, you know, is this part of your FNHC? And Clarence might know more about that. You know, in terms of seeking funds from Indigenous services, they might want to see that that's on as a priority on your system. So, but honestly, I unless you have a plan or something that says we need this many houses at this point in time, this is where they're gonna go, then, you know, then at least you're following that plan. So to sort of just show up and hire a design engineer, that might not necessarily be the best approach here. They'll probably turn around and ask you to develop to get that work done. Similar to the daycare that I talked about earlier. You know, we didn't have that in place, so the community didn't have an understanding of where that was going to fit within their community. So that was, you know, and then that turned into the community plan. So
yeah, often I've seen it where, you know, residential option areas will show some options, as well as ICI type of areas like industrial, commercial, institutional, for like a daycare or something like that, for sure. Yeah. A couple more questions here. Would the legal survey be done after or during the feasibility study?
Well, I think it would be done after the feasibility study. You wouldn't necessarily, I mean, The feasibility study is kind of going to be just a general guesstimate. You're going to need a survey, a legal surveying involved. And again, that's where you would put your provisional costs aside, depending on the size of it, 20, 30, 40,000 for legal surveying. But definitely not necessarily part of the feasibility study. You still want some flexibility to change. And I think once you bring in a legal survey, you start locking things in, and might not necessarily be able to move things around if you need to.
Oh, that makes sense. Another question here. If a feasibility study is self-funded, is it advisable to have ISC, Indigenous Services Canada, involved on the project team?
It depends. If you plan to seek funding from ISC for the design and construction, then I would at least let them know that you are wandering down that road, getting the feasibility study, because trying to get them caught up might, they might dispute your engineer, your feasibility studies terms of reference, that you're not incorporating what they would consider to be I don't know, important or whatnot. So generally I would still let them know. We have one project where the First Nation actually self-funded the design component, and then now we're getting into the construction. So we brought the ISC along for that design component, even though they didn't put any funds into it. So we just want to make sure that we're going to be in compliance with ISC's what their level of services requirements are.
Yep, for sure. Thanks, Drew. One more question. Probably need a quicker answer here. We're almost out of time. Can you speak more to the civil side of subdivision development? I imagine that means more civil engineering side and the technical aspects. Maybe just some quick comments.
No. I'm not too sure what the question's referring to. Yeah, I mean, maybe if you want to write me and elaborate a bit more on what you're getting at, the civil engineering aspects of it. Is that residential? Is it the infrastructure? Water, wastewater, those types of things. So sorry, I can't.
So we can certainly, whoever asked the question, if you want to go through the delegates listing or connect through Drew's on the right below where the feed is showing, you can connect with Drew there. Just on commenting on that, the engineering side, certainly if there's water and sewer involved, or if there's not sewer involved, like sewer collection, that affects lot sizes and that'll affect the legal survey dimensioning you get. So there's a lot of things involved on the engineering side that need to be paid attention to and even planned. Oftentimes, because there's not capital funding available these days automatically for subdivision development, ISC has not really been so much growth related in their funding as much as addressing water and some of these other critical areas. It is a challenge to plan better with less funds available. So, doing this side of it, the development, the planning part is much more critical. So thanks, Drew, for sharing today. And the working group has a gift of artwork that will be sent to you on behalf of the conference. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise and advice. Also, on the passport to prizes, we will put up the word here. You should write it down for this session. The session 4 code is develop. So write that down, and then you can go from the platform, you can go to the Passport to Prizes area and to the session time period and put in that code. Also today, we'd ask if you could help us in planning future events by completing a survey at the bottom of the page where the feed is showing from. Very short survey. We will be on a short break now. The next sessions start right at 2 p.m. So please come back right away. The next session in this stream is radon and mold, and I believe it's from FNHC, the First Nations Inuit Health Branch. Again, more important information for us to hear. So thank you everyone for joining in, and we'll see you again in a few minutes.